17 years ago, this thing came out. Well, a little bit more than that, actually. We're going into the 18th year in 2025, and we're only a couple years away from 20 years since the launch of the original iPhone. Comparing the 16 Pro Max to this thing, it's absolutely hilarious. Look at this right here. I mean, they like have different philosophies altogether, but one thing they still retain is that Apple logo on the back, them curved corners. They still retain that, but that oh my goodness, look at that camera. That camera, the camera is the size of the LiDAR. It's actually, the LiDAR is bigger than the camera on the iPhone 1. This is hilarious. Also, you could see right here, we have a flash that's larger than the camera. Heck, the camera is almost the size of that little hole right there on the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Just excuse me if I'm laughing a little bit, but no, this video doesn't make sense in a comparison sense. This is for entertainment and for fun. I just wanted to look at these massive differences, and it's so funny because all these years later, I still pick up the first iPhone, and I feel like this is more innovative than this in terms of like when this came out, this felt so like life changing right here, this product. This one right here feels like, well, another big phone in the market, nice cameras, all good. This doesn't have that same effect that the original iPhone had. Is it still way better? Absolutely, but it doesn't have that same effect. Heck, I don't even know if the battery is going to last the entirety of this video, but you can see there's a lot of things that are still classic to the iPhone experience. If you look here, the icons are still similarly shaped. They still have the dock with the same 4 layout. Right there, still doesn't let you customize multiple ones down there. And then they still retain that similar shape. They no longer have a headphone jack, and the SIM card tray right here, the SIM card that goes in here is laughably large. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. All right, so let's go ahead and open this thing up. And I know this video is absolutely ridiculous, but it's fun. You can see, look at this thing right here. This thing is like the size of an SD card. There's micro SD cards that are smaller than this thing nowadays. I mean, look at this. This is ridiculous. This thing is huge. You could like, this will go in the slot of your MacBook Pro from your camera. That's how large a SIM card was. Now we don't even have a SIM. And look at that headphone jack as well. Even though the headphone jack is a 3.5 mil. Hold on, I don't even know how to use this thing anymore. Even if that thing is a 3.5 mil, the cutout for it is absolutely massive on there. It actually looks like I could probably stick an even larger headphone jack into there. You can see there, it was a nice texture though on that power button for the iPhone 1 right there. You could definitely feel it out. And the overall shape, just look at this thing in your hand. It literally was designed to just sit there and live inside of your hand. However, now we have this big ginormous thing over here that it's comfortable. I mean, if you have a large hand, but if you don't, it's not. So definitely very, very big. But you'll see, look at the thickness. It's thicker than the iPhone 16 Pro Max, but it still retains like kind of that similar feel on the back because Apple went to the infused glass, which kind of mimics like an aluminum feel. So it still has that. It also has like a little grip at the bottom. I think this was for cellular. I'm not exactly sure, but definitely has a grip right there. And you'll simpler times for this iPhone right here. And look at the bezels. The bezels were absolutely astonishingly large. Now you'll see we basically have 0 bezels, almost nothing. What a difference we have come to. But look at this unlock screen as well. So this is how you unlock the iPhone now. Face ID, swipe up, whatever. You're on your way. But look at this lock screen. Check this out. Super simple, slide to unlock. And at the time, so many so many manufacturers were copying the iPhone. A lot of cheap rip-offs of this phone back then. This thing was game-changing at the time. And it was just, that was so satisfying right there. Also, this iPhone couldn't even have a wallpaper on the home screen. It was always just a black screen right there with apps. Super simple though. It had your basics. It almost doesn't even feel like a smartphone, but it technically was at the time. Look at the shiny aluminum rails around the edge of this 17-year-old iPhone. What a beautiful design right there. That is just absolutely stunning right there. So definitely really nice. And actually, I'm being a little sarcastic right now, but definitely at the time, this thing felt like $1 million in your hand at the time. This was like unlike anything on the market at the time. And also you'll see there was like nice little divots here inside of the volume rocker, and you had the classic silence switch, which made this kind of effect. And Apple kind of got rid of this whole thing in the middle of the screen, but it had that classic silence switch on there, and this stuff still works. This phone still works 17 years later. Although my battery is getting kind of low, I'm getting a little nervous there. But you'll see the little divots for the volume rockers right here, and that would be right on the screen like that. So that's how that operated right there. And look at the connector on this thing. Huge charging connector. And there you go. Now we're charging. Now, at this point in time, the iPhone 1 here versus the iPhone 16 is basically unusable. So I can go to the App Store here, and they do have an App Store here. And by the way, we're on the last version I had on here was 3.1.3, something like that. So 3.1.3 iOS 3.1.3. So if I go over here to App Store and I try to open this thing up, and by the way, my screen is messed up at the top. I don't know what happened. I can't connect to the App Store. So if I go to Safari, I can go ahead and Google something. Let's go to Google right here. I can go to Google, and I could probably Google like, hold on, birds. I don't know why I'm putting birds. You know, let's keep it on topic here. Let's do iPhones right here. So you can do a basic Google search on here, and you can actually see the iPhone, but if you try to buy the iPhone from Apple's website, you can't open the page. So if you're using Apple's iPhone from 17 years ago, you can't even buy an iPhone online anymore from this phone. However, look at the size of this one thumb action. This thing is freaking amazing for one thumbing. This was Steve Jobs' design right here for sure. The one thumb, the feel in the hand, the design for humans kind of feel. This is just like computer in your pocket, huge, massive tablet in your pocket. And this was designed for the human hand. Also, everything was more simple. But if you notice here, even 17 years later, look at how this thing performs. It can still launch apps relatively quickly. I mean, this is not going to slow me down if I need to do a quick calculation. Need to make a phone call. That's going to work out okay. Need to check the weather. I don't even know if it'll... Oh, I got the weather. So I got decent weather report here. I don't even know if that's correct anymore. Let's see. Yeah, that one says 64. This one says 55. So I don't even think that's the correct weather on there. You could also do voice memos, and the layout and the look of this is kind of similar to GarageBand. It was pretty nice looking for the time. You could do some simple voice memos. We'll take a look at the camera in a little bit, but look at the way the clock looked. Such a different look from the newer clock over here. But you'll see the actual layout is still the same on the newer iPhones. World clock in the same location, alarms, stopwatches in the same location as is our timers. So those are still in the same locations, although a lot better on the newer phone. And you had that classic satisfying click. So until Touch ID came later, you weren't able to unlock without having like a passcode or something like that. And then the Notes app kind of looked like some legal pad paper. It was just really, really nice looking. Hey, this is a test. And yes, even though this is a really small keyboard, it was actually very, very accurate. Very accurate, and you could easily type on this. Even big hands could type on this keyboard because it just was super accurate. And back in the day, we would actually take the Android phones and download these kind of like keyboards to mimic the iPhone. That's how good the keyboard was back in the day. Let me know if you were one of those people who had an Android phone, you didn't buy an iPhone, but you wanted their keyboard, and you downloaded one of those third-party apps from Android phone to kind of mimic the keyboard, because I definitely did that. Now, looking at the display on the iPhone 16 Pro Max, it's like having a portable television in your pocket these days by comparison to what you have over here. And you couldn't even have a control center or anything like that on this really old iPhone 1. If we go over here, you have to go into settings, brightness, and then you could go to max brightness. Now, the brightness is actually surprisingly pretty usable even to this day, but the panel is super washed out. You turn it on the angle, goodbye. There it goes. Goodbye. We'll see you later, bud. If we go to auto brightness, it actually was decently legible in most lighting conditions, just not in direct sunlight. So it was actually usable for the time. If we go over to wallpapers and I go to wallpaper here, you'll see you had a various amount. Now, I'm not sure if the very first iPhone had a ton of wallpapers, like the very first software, but they probably added some more later. but just very basic wallpaper setup. But they actually still have, and there's the Mona Lisa, they actually still have this wallpaper right here with the Earth. That one is still available as a throwback to the older iPhone right here. As you can see right there, they still have something similar on the newer one. But you'll see animations wise, look at this thing. Still swipes in good coming out of an application. A little bit of a delay, but nothing too crazy. Over here, contacts. You could still grab someone's contacts these days. So you got some ways to use this phone. And instead of it being called Apple Music, it was iPod, because back in those times, iPod was the jam. When this came out, iPods were still a big thing. The iPhone eventually overtook iPods because it was an iPod and a phone. And an iPod and a phone. You know, that little statement Steve Jobs made, he was correct. You had to put your music on from iTunes. And look at YouTube. YouTube looks like a 1940s television right there. Let's see if we can open it. I highly doubt that we're going to be able to get any content. No connectivity to YouTube. So today, your iPhone 1 is a dumb phone. Basically, it could do basically nothing but the basics. This is actually worse than probably some flip phones that have the internet access these days in terms of like what you can do on the phone. And my battery can barely last 1 hour at this point. Back in the day, the battery life was better. My battery is really old, so it would need a replacement to be even operational these days. It still wasn't an all-day phone. If you were using it a lot, you would have to charge this multiple times a day. Just a small cell inside this body. So don't overlook the luxuries you have these days with these really long-lasting battery life iPhones. Even the base model iPhones destroy some of the early days of iPhone. And of course you need it because you're relying more on the phone these days. But if you just like lock this in the way people used it, the actual usability all these years later, the way they used it back then was very different. People would just use it like very normal, just for music, taking some phone calls, making a couple pictures, checking the weather. It was a very simple tool back then. Now it's like everything in the kitchen sink, everything gaming, camera, video, your whole life basically on your phone now. It was never like that before, but this was like the introduction that started it all. And look at this. There wasn't even a battery section, no low power modes, nothing like that. Some of the things came later with the 4 series and the 4S series, which is when I actually started my channel back in 2011, 14 years ago, or was it like 13 years ago at this point? I started with the 4S, but definitely they didn't even have a battery section back then. So, and honestly, this phone kind of feels like an iPod. It does. It feels like one of the older iPods, but this headphone jack allowed for those nice like little ear pods back in the day that kind of like they were like the AirPods for that time. But this camera is so laughably small. Let me look at the sensor. Let's see if we can zoom in on that sensor. Yeah, we were able to. Look at how tiny that sensor is in there. Let's go ahead and take a look at the actual quality though. All right, so we'll bring in the iPhone 16 right here and we'll go to photos and you'll see beautiful photo there, obviously from a 16 Pro Max. And why this is like so crazy impressive how good the cameras have become was because in these times, this is what people had. This is what people were paying like $500, $600, $700 for at this time. Let's go ahead and take a photo here. Oh man, look at the quality. It's just phenomenal on the first gen. I'm not even sure where that photo went. Hold on. All right, so here's the photo. Gorgeous quality, no sharpness whatsoever. So you definitely had to be outdoors, or you definitely had to back it up a bit to get a decent quality photo. There was no autofocus things like that. It was just a very simple flip phone style quality camera back then. Honestly, some flip phones perform about the same as this. Now, in terms of video, you could also do video. I don't even see a section for video on here. Like there's no video. So it was just a camera. And if you want to do a selfie, you had to flip it around this way. So yeah, do you see the improvements? Do you see how good it is now for you guys? Do you see it? Do you see that? Because I definitely see it. It's mind blowing, the kind of technology we have these days with these current smartphones when you really look at it compared to something like this. So yeah, that's a 16 Pro Max. We mostly talked about the one here, but we made a lot of comparisons. That was the 16 Pro Max versus the iPhone 1 17 years later. You can see massive improvements across the board, massive screen, action buttons, just wow. Your whole life is on here now. It's time to hang in the towel, I think, for the iPhone 1. Let me know if you want to see some other of these older classic antique style videos where we cover iPhone 3, iPhone 4, iPhone 5, iPhone 6, some of these older classics versus the newer ones to see how far they have come. But definitely look at the change. Unbelievable. I'll catch you all in the next episode. Thank you very much for watching. If you found this entertaining, enjoyable, click the like button for me, and I'll catch you on the next one. Nick here. Be sure to be well, and peace.